Welcome to the second edition of Tuning Up Your Tin Sandwich for our second virtual SPAH. Hopefully the world will be healthy enough for us to do this live in 2022. My name is Jim Longley. My friend and partner in everything Harmonica, Kelly Cunningham, and I are going to present more Tuning Up Your Tin Sandwich. In this year's presentation, we are going to take an out-of-the-box harmonica and tune it up to make it perform on the level of a professionally customized harp worth over $200. We are going to try to cram a lot of information into this segment, so please reserve your questions until the end or use chat.
Hi, I wanted to show you the harp that we're going to be using for today's presentation. We chose a Hohner crossover, this one in G. We like Hohner's harps, of course, but the crossover is one we especially like. I think it's one of the best production harps out there. Made to pretty tight tolerances. It's loud. It's got a good presence to it. Anyway, let me unbox this one. But this is the harp. Big open back, nice big sound. It's also got a bamboo comb. Personally, I like the organic combs. I like the sound of the harp with the organic combs. Bolts and screws, putting everything together makes it very accessible, very cleanable, and excellent for working on and customizing. So that's one of the main reasons we chose this harp. So I'll play a little bit of the harp for you. Here's some blow reeds, chords, single notes, and then we'll try to do some splits as well. So a little discordant on some of that. Single notes. So again, we're wanting you to hear what it sounds like right out of the box, and then we'll play it again after we've done everything that we're going to do to it. Okay, here's some splits. Not too bad. Draw notes. Single notes. And we'll try some bends. So I'll try bends from hole 2 to hole 4. So it sounds a little soft to me, but it's a smooth bend. I'm getting consistent volume throughout the range. So we'll try 3. That was 2. So I'm really having to work to control to get the same amount of volume through that bend. It's got a bit of a gap to it. And here's 4. Four bends pretty easily and pretty evenly, which is good. So one of the things that we do with our modifications is set the harp up to be able to do overblows. I'm only 6 years into playing, and I'm just now getting into overblows. I can do them on a properly set up harp. I'm not great on all the out-of-the-box harps. Probably after 9 or more years of experience, maybe that will make it different, but I don't think so. I think you still need a little bit of a setup to it. So this is out of the box. We're going to try with 4 first. So that's 4. I'm going to draw on 4. The reason I'm doing that is if you can get the 4 into a bend and the reverse your air to a blow, that should get you into the overblow. At least that's the thought. Yeah, there's too much air leaking past, so I'm not locking that top reed and exciting the bottom reed. We'll try it with 5. So here's 4, 5. So I'll do a draw on 5. Yep. Yep, I'm not locking that top reed. So I'm not going to get a clean overblow. We'll try 6. So I can get the overblow on 6. It's a little squawky getting into it, but it's a clean sounding overblow once it pops in. So we're going to make that a little easier and hopefully make it possible on holes 4 and 5 as well. So anyway, lots to do on this. Let's get started. So now it's time to take the harp apart and get it to its core pieces. All right, cover plates. And now it's time to take the reed plates off the comb. Three screws and we're in. The harp is ready to work on. I like to use smartphones or tablets as a backlight for examining my reeds, looking at the profiles, looking at the gaps, and even the tolerance between the reed and the reed plate. Most of these devices, you have a notes app or something that has a white background, and it gives you a nice even white light. And you can put your reed up to the light and examine the profiles. You can see where it's leaky at the rivet end of the reed, which keeps you from having a good sealed reed, and smooth bends and even overblows. So at this point, I'm looking at the draw plate and then looking at the blow plate. And I can see the reeds that are most in need of attention. Most all the reeds we're going to push a little bit more into the gap at the rivet end to give it a good, nice, tight seal. One or two are actually already there. I'm pushing this reed down, and that's in its most closed position, which it should seal, but you can see how it's letting air through right up to the rivet end of that reed. And that's a gappy reed. We need to fix that. During my evaluation, I like to take note of the reeds I see that have too much of a gap at the rivet end and mark them. I simply use a marker to designate these reeds. These are the reeds I will want to adjust into the slot a little more at the rivet end. Now it's time to work on flattening the reed plates. We'll start with the blow plate, and we'll start by putting a straight edge up against the leading edge of the blow plate, which you can tell from this particular reed plate by the ridge that's on the top outside front. And I've got a known straight edge I know is straight, and that's what I'm using to check its flatness. And I'll put it up against a white background. It could be a white piece of cardboard, an open window, a backlight, a notes app on your tablet, just something that you can see the light leak and give you a clue to the gap. And then we'll gently work the brass to bend it into the right shape. And again, we want to lay that straight edge right along the front, leading blow edge of that plate, right in front of the rivets. And we make progress slowly. But that's okay. What we're trying to come up with is a very flat plate, so it'll seal well. Again, nothing wrong with working a little bit slowly here. As you can see, we're making progress. We don't want to spring it too far the other way So that's why we work slowly and methodically, and you get a feel for it after a while. Still just a little bit of a gap right there. And that's where our overblow reeds are going to be, so we want to make sure it seals well. And it takes a little bit of practice to get the straight edge aligned flat. But once you do, you can see where there's gaps or where there is flatness. So that was pretty flat on the front leading edge, and we'll also check the back edge. Want to make sure that the plate is flat from front to back. And this is along the length of the reed plate, of course. And we'll also want to check the ends of the reed plate. So if we find any light leaks, checking the width of the reed plate. Of course, we're also going to be checking through the middle section of that reed plate as well for leaks from front to back. We'll probably have to use a special tool. Andrew Zajac makes some that kind of look like little lobster claws that give you the torque necessary to bend that back in place. After we've finished with the blow plate, we're going to go ahead and check the draw plate. And again, checking the leading draw edge on the inside, which you can tell from the ridge that's on the outside leading edge of that plate. And then making any adjustments where we see any light leaking through. And we get it to where it is flat. And once we've gotten the front leading edge, we also want to check the back edge, make sure it's also flat. And if we see any leaks, again, adjust a little bit at a time until you get it nice and flat. We can also check the front to back flatness of it, but we're going to do one other step with this draw plate, and that's going to be flat sanding. And that will ensure a really good seal to our comb. Okay, so now it's time to flat sand the draw plate. We're going to use some double-sided Scotch tape to stick our sandpaper down at either end of the sandpaper. We don't want any tape underneath where we're sanding. We want that as flat as possible on the surface, and we're using a piece of marble. A nice hard surface is what you want to sand on, something very flat itself. And we're going to use 400 wet or dry as our first pass. And we're going to be flat sanding the draw plate, as I said, and it's going to be the side that doesn't have any reeds on it, of course, and that's the side that's going to fit tight to the comb. I'm using some red marks a lot just to reference my first bit of sanding, and you'll start seeing the areas that are not quite flat show up. And so I'll work it side to side and figure eight until I get all the little dark areas that you see there, even with the rest of the plate. And you can see a little bit more on our flat sanding from our first video, which is on SPAH.org, their YouTube channel. They broke that video out last year, and it's still available. We're just going through this one rather quickly, as you can see. So we try to get a nice even sheen and no divots. And then we make a second pass with 800 wet or dry sandpaper. We don't really get anything finer than that. I find it pretty much diminishing returns. And 800 will just kind of smooth out what we did with 400. Rinse off the sanding and leave the plate wet, because we want a wet sand now on that same 800, which is going to give it a little bit of a polish. And we'll rinse that off again. Dry off the plate. And we're ready to go.
Reeds and reed plates are mass-produced by die cutting. The resulting tolerances between the reed slot and the reed are often a bit looser than what you would want from a high-performance harmonica. Embossing involves using a hard metal tool to reform the edges of the slot to tighten these tolerances. We use a variety of tools to accomplish this task, including a leather burnishing tool, the ball end of a tuning fork, and a small steel socket wrench socket.
These are magnified views of the Draw 2 reed at the free end. The reeds are held flat to the reed plate by a piece of clear tape. The plates are backlit to see the tolerance of the openings. The reed on the left is from a stock reed plate, while the reed on the right is from a professionally customized harp. You'll note that the reed on the right has been embossed at the end of the slot to close the tolerance of the free end of the reed. Here are the same Draw 2 reeds in the middle of the reed. Again, the reed on the left is the stock reed plate, and the one on the right is from a professionally customized harp. Note the embossing on either side of the reed, which tightens the tolerance between the reed and the reed plate. Using my iPad as a backlight, I use a mouse pad I prepared with a slot cut into it that's just large enough to light one reed slot opening in the reed plate. This helps me examine the tolerance of the gap around the reed to the edge of the slot. I first want to straighten the reed in the reed slot so it has the same tolerance on either side of the reed. In this instance, I'm using a reed wrench and plinking tool from Richard Slay. I usually wear a pair of magnifying glasses to be able to clearly see my work. Moving the reed back and forth in the slot, I work to have the same tolerance on either side of the reed. Once I have the reed straight in the slot, I start working on embossing the slot where needed for best responsiveness of the reed. To emboss the ends of the slot near the reed's rivet end, I use a pointed steel burnishing tool. The fine point on the burnishing tool allows me to emboss the slot right up to the rivet head of the reed. I use a metal shim to support the reed and use the reed itself as a guide to direct the pointed burnishing tool along the edge of the slot, embossing material into the slot, closing the gap. This is done, of course, on both sides of the reed. It's a good idea to plink the reed after each step of reed work to make sure the reed is behaving properly and to allow the reed to seek its natural state. For embossing the main length of the slot, I prefer to use a steel socket to give me even pressure and embossing on either side of the slot. The flat end of the socket lets me emboss all the way to the free end of the reed. From plinking this reed, you can hear that the embossing is starting to restrict the reed. So, I use a ceramic file to slightly take the edge off the embossing until the reed moves freely in the slot. I look at it with my eyes, Make sure everything looks clear. And then I plink the reed again to hear it and see if it's free. I'll work on each reed in this manner. Again, if the reed is binding a little bit, I'll use that ceramic file to even off the embossing and free up the reed. On some reeds, I may find that the end of the reed has a fairly large gap to the slot's end. I use the same pointed burnishing tool to emboss the end of the slot to close this gap as needed. And as always, checking with the plinking tool, making sure the reed is free. I'll work the draw plate from low to high reed, and then I'll work the blow plate from low to high. You can see the embossing on the end of this slot a little bit easier. I do pay special attention to reeds 4, 5, and 6 on both the blow plate and the draw plate to make sure they have a good tight tolerance for performing in overblows. Now, getting back to those reeds that I marked earlier, we want to push the rivet end of the reed into the slot a little bit more on those reeds, because I saw a little bit too much of a gap when I put the reed in its most closed position. So I support the reed with my plinking tool to keep the whole reed from dipping down into the slot in its normal state. And then once I've got it supported, I use that same burnishing tool to gently push the reed a little bit more into the slot. And I'll work all those reeds that I marked. And if I see any other reeds that look like they need a little bit more dip into the slot at the rivet end.
The shape of the reed is important. Ideally, the reed needs to be as flat as possible when it is in its most closed position in the reed slot. This improves efficiency, responsiveness, and linearity of tone, especially in bends and overblows. The reed gap is the distance between the surface of the reed plate and the reed at rest.
We want to show you first a professionally customized harp. Note the gaps on the reeds. They're very consistent, and they also mirror almost the thickness of the reed. Now let's look at the reed plates we're working on. The gaps are inconsistent from reed to reed. What we want to do is make them look more like the professionally customized harp. My goal here is to provide uniform gapping of each reed in the reed plate and to shape the profile of the reed so that it sits flat and has maximum seal when it's in its most closed position in the slot. Usually, I gap the reed from the plate surface to the bottom of the reed about as high as the thickness of the reed itself. I also work to take the curvature out of each reed so it has maximum flatness when it's in its most closed position. This increases the efficiency and responsiveness of the reed. It also lends to a better seal for overblows. For this reed work, I'm using my combination reed wrench and plinking tool from Richard Slay, as well as a curved steel tool I made from a dental instrument. On this plinking tool is a bulge that works as a fulcrum. It helps me to apply square perpendicular pressure to the reed as I adjust the gap. The curved dental tool is being used to reverse the curves I find in the reeds. The plinking tool is good for bending the reed to the right gap while applying even perpendicular pressure. The dental tool is great for working the curvature of the reed during this phase. As I gap and shape each reed, I constantly plink the reed. This allows the metal to assume its natural state after each adjustment. You'll see that after plinking the reed, it will tend to go back to the position it was in before you made the adjustment. Adjusting and then plinking will assure that your adjustments will be true. I'm looking to create uniformity in my reed work. I want the reeds to be uniformly flat and to be uniformly gapped according to the position and thickness of the reeds. Ideally, each reed should have the same loudness and ease of playing. This lends to good, strong chords as well as an even temperament playing note to note. I work both the blow plate and the draw plate towards the same goals. When I want to test my work, I simply sandwich the plates and comb in their proper positions. You can easily tell the orientation of the plates by the length of the slots and on this harmonica, the grooves on the outside fronts of both plates. I simply place the plates on the comb and clamp them together with my fingers. This should allow me to play the harp and test my work. Okay, so we just finished shaping and gapping the reeds on both the draw and the blow plates. So right now I'm just checking out the performance, see where I'm at in things, and I'm simply clamping the draw and the blow plates to the comb for testing. So we'll work with some of the draw reeds and the bends and see how they do. Here's one. Nice and loud. No effort at all. And we'll try a bend with one even. And that goes into it really smooth. Let's go to two. And that was a little soft before, and it's doing a lot better now. And then three, we had kind of a gap on it. It's got lots of energy all the way through the bend now. And then four. Real smooth. Of course, my lip's buzzing against the bottom of it a little bit. And Then we'll try some of the blow bends on top. Just see how we're doing there. That's 10, 9. Real clean, 8. Seven. So great bends on top. How about overblows? So 6 is usually one of our easier overblows, and we were actually able to get into an overblow on 6 before we did any modifications. It was a little squawky getting into it, but it did a good job as once it finally locked in. So we're going for 6. That goes into the overblow really easy. Here's 5. So not bad. There's some other things that we're going to do for the overblows to make them even smoother to go into, but at this stage, 5 is doing really well. So 4 is the tough one. Let's give 4 a try. So there's 4. It's wanting to, but it's not quite there yet. So we've got some more stuff to do to 4 as far as gapping and get it to where it's going to snap into that overblow a little better. And on a G harp, the 4 overblow is a little tough to do, but I think we'll be able to get there. Anyway, so a little bit more to do, and we'll get to it. At this point, I'm examining specifically reeds 4, 5, and 6 to, number 1, check the flatness of the reed shape, and number 2, gap them just tight enough to snap into the overblow without making the reeds lock up or lose playability for normal operation. Again, I'm using the curved dental tool to shape the reeds flat. Often when I do this, it also closes the gap if the reed had a little bit of a curve to it. As you can see, I'm not just working on 4, 5, and 6 of the blow plate, but I also work the same reeds on the draw plate. Overblows are a cooperation of both the blow and the draw reeds of each hole. So we just finished doing another adjustment on reeds 4, 5, and 6 for overblows, working on the blow plate and the draw plate. We're trying to make sure that that reed is nice and flat in the gap and not curved up in any way, so that when it enters that gap, it's as sealed off as it can be. So I did see a little bit of curvature that I needed to take care of, and that's what you saw me do. So we're going to try reeds 5, 6, 5, and 4 again in that order. And let's see how the overblows are doing. Here's 6. It's like butter. It's real easy. 5. Of course, when I get my lips right, it's a little better and seal off with my fingers. Make sure that it's sitting flat. It's a nice clean overblow. Now, are we going to get anything out of 4? Let's see. We're getting our 4 overblow. It's a little leaky. Again, we're going to do something else to address that, but we're getting there.
Looking at a pro-customized harp, we can see a technique applied to the overblow reeds at the rivet end. You are looking at the rivet ends of both the blow 3 reed and the blow 4 reed. The blow 4 reed is one that has been set up for overblows. Notice that the blow 4 reed has some strategically placed wax in this leaky part of the reed, whereas blow 3 does not. Blow 5 and blow 6 also are treated the same way. Customizers often use combinations of beeswax, carnauba wax, and other ingredients to backfill the leaky spots at the rivet end of the reed. This helps enable a good seal when the reed is bent for an overblow. We are going to use a bit of a different technique from an idea put forth by Brendan Power. We are going to use a nail polish pen to apply a controlled quantity of nail polish to that leaky part of the reed. The nail polish pen has a very fine applicator tip that makes it ideal for our purposes. We can squeeze the nail polish through the tip onto the reed right where we need it.
This process does take a bit of a steady hand and a fine touch. The goal is to fill the corner where the reed's rivet pad and the reed meet. We don't want to go too far down into the free end of the reed, probably only about 1/16 of an inch. I do both the blow plate and the draw plate on reeds 4, 5, and 6. After letting the nail polish cure for about an hour, I use my finest metal feeler in my feeler gauge to cut the polish away from the free part of the reed. I make sure the feeler stays up against the reed while I cut it free. I then use the chisel end of my plinking tool to clean any excess polish from the reed. Again, I plink each reed to free it of any debris. Now it's time to put the core parts of the harp back together. This time I plan on screwing them together. Any modifications that I do from this point going forward, I should be able to do with these parts fully assembled. With the plates assembled to the comb, I should be able to test out my work most effectively. Okay, so we're back from applying the nail polish on the rivet pad to reed corner that can be leaky, and we've done that to reeds 4, 5, and 6 on both the blow and the draw plates to give us a better seal and to pop us into that overblow a little easier. So I'm not great at overblow 4 on a G. On a higher harp, I have an easier time. But let's give overblow 4 a try and see if I can get one out of it. So I'm getting it. I'm having to work a little bit, but that's not unusual for me because I'm relatively new to overblows. I'm pretty happy with it, to be honest with you. And I can adjust it a little bit more later on using this hook tool, even after the plates are on. So I can adjust the reed gapping. But as far as the sealing is concerned, I think we're there. The nail polish helped out a lot. I'm not getting any air passage sounds. It sounds very clean. All right, so we're going to do 5. Really easy. 6. That's actually easier than a bend. And then no stoppage, very free. We're where we want to be with this. To smooth the corners of the reed plates, I transfer them onto a comb I've set aside for this task. Using a Post-it note, I cover the reeds and seal the covering with masking tape at either end. This keeps any debris out of the reeds while I sand the corners. Smoothing the corners of the reed plate is more about the comfort of using the instrument than it is about performance. I like using a sanding sponge, usually found in a hardware store's paint department, as a base for the same 400 wet or dry sandpaper I use for sanding the draw plate. The sponge works well at providing a smooth sanding surface. This helps create smooth, rounded edges to the outside corners of the reed plates. I work to soften the end outside edges of the reed plates and round them just a little, as well as the corners of the reed plates. Once I'm happy with the shape of my work using the 400 grit sandpaper, I change to 800 grit and go over my work once again to polish it a bit further. Finally, I finish off the surface of the brass I just sanded with 4/0 steel wool. This brightens the brass and gives the smoothed corners a polished satin feel. Once the plates are removed from my sanding comb, I rinse them off and dry them. They're all ready for tuning. While I do like the sound and durability of the Crossover stock bamboo comb, its corners and surface are a bit rougher in finish. I've started using Hohner's PEAR wood combs because they have a smoother, more uniform machined finish while still having that organic comb sound I like. For an extra finishing touch, I choose a good polyurethane to use on the front edges of the comb. Using a small brush, I dab enough polyurethane on the end of each tine of the comb and on the front side ends of the comb to create a smooth, rounded coating. I'll let this cure for several hours. Then I sand any excess off the flat sides of the comb the same way I flat sanded the draw plate. Once dried, the end result is a high-gloss, wet-looking, and very durable coating that's smooth to the mouth.
You are looking at a very specially made tuner developed by Dick Schoberg. The advantage of this tuner is that you can tune the reeds while still on the tuner and test your work immediately. The brass stops allow you to play one reed or more than one reed in chords or splits. Another advantage is that the air tube that activates the reed takes your embouchure out of the equation. We're not saying you have to use a tuner like this. This one here just happens to be a gift that Jim's kind wife gave to him for his birthday. The video we did last year shows you how we usually use the Harmonica's comb and a French tuner device, which is relatively inexpensive.
We're using Peterson's iStrobosoft tuner app for Android and iOS. With this app, you can easily change the frequency fundamental, and the scent deviations from the note are very easy to see. This can be helpful if you follow tuning charts from folks like Andrew Zajac, who uses different frequency fundamentals and scent deviations to peg the tuning of each reed. We work each reed as the plate is mounted on the tuner. Drawing on the air tube moves air over the reed where the brass stop valve has been pulled out. The rubber plate gasket and holding rods of the tuner provide a good seal for accurate tones that don't fluctuate with your embouchure. I'm using a ceramic file to tune these brass reeds. taking a little off at the free end of the reed to raise its pitch and a little off the rivet end to lower the pitch. I support the reed from the free end with a metal shim to give me a solid foundation for filing and to keep from deforming the reed. After each adjustment, I plink the reed to clear any debris, settle the metal, and get accurate reading of its tuning. The tuning chart we're using is based off of Andrew Zajak's tuning methods, but we've adapted it for tuning on the Schoberg tuner, which tunes somewhat differently than using the comb and French tuner device, which Andrew developed his methods for. The iStrobosoft app, which we're using, is easily calibrated, which we do before every tuning by playing a tone reference at 440 Hz. You can find good reference tones on YouTube. For a more in-depth view of tuning using merely the harmonica's comb and a French tuner device, please watch last year's Tuning Up Your Tin Sandwich. The video should still be available on SPAH.org's channel on YouTube. Once we're finished tuning, it's time to reassemble the harmonica. I like to square up the plates and the comb using a flat hard surface before bolting the sandwich together. Another modification we like to make is to assemble the cover plates to the harmonica using brass bolts and nuts. We use number 2 56 thread bolts that are at least 3/8 of an inch long, as well as the corresponding number 2 56 nuts. This gives us good torque without fear of stripping for our cover assemblies. I make any final adjustments I need to once the harmonica is fully assembled with my curved reed tool. With it, I can fine-tune gapping, especially for my bending and overblow reeds. Okay, so now that it's back together and finished, we'll play some things for comparison. We'll start with some chords. There's a lot less air going into those chords to give a lot more sound, which makes it a lot more of a pleasure to play. Plus, they're nice and tight. Same with the draw. And now single notes. Good clean octaves. Sounds very unified. Good clean overblows, nice tone. They go in fairly easy, even 4, which is difficult for me. Making sure that all the leaks are as sealed as possible, that you've got good close tolerances to those reeds from the slot to the reed itself, that the reed sits nice and flat in that slot at its most closed position, and then orchestrating the gap between the blow reed and the draw reed so that you get enough pressure to pop it into that overblow. And it's working great in this harp now.
Thank you for watching more Tuning Up Your Tin Sandwich. We hope you have enjoyed this presentation as much as we enjoyed producing it. This ongoing project continues to enhance our appreciation for the skills and knowledge the customizers demonstrate in their craft. We hope to see you live in 2022.